Professor Wergley is here. We just got done looking at the slides. Let's come back to the code. Make sure you save all your files. We're going to open up number 3, text.html. And you're going to see some JavaScript code here. So I have 3 functions: get username, set username, and check password. These are the functions that we just got done implementing. Now, if I scroll down, you'll see I have onClicks. So if I click on the get username button, it's going to call the get username function, and so on with the other functions. Now, we're going to write the same thing in jQuery and see how we can implement this. Right now, I don't want to focus on the ready function, and I don't want to focus on these onClicks. I'm simply going to put jQuery inside this function call and translate the JavaScript code into jQuery. After that, we can then go and write everything in jQuery so you can see the difference between the two. For right now, let's just translate this JavaScript code into jQuery. So the first thing I'm going to do is get username. I'm going to comment out the JavaScript code, and I'm going to rewrite it using jQuery. So let's say I want to print out the text object's ID and the value. You'll see here I had to call document.getElement by ID. I'm looking for ID equal to user. I set that to a variable. That way I don't have to write document.getElement by ID twice. But with jQuery, it's much easier. I can directly do the print. So I'll do console log. I'm going to use a jQuery selector. I'm going to look for the user ID, and we're looking for the ID. So I'm going to use the attribute function and look for the attribute equal to ID. I'm going to concatenate that, set it equals just like we had before. I'm going to concatenate that with the value. So I'll call the user ID again and call the value function. So if I expand the window here, you'll see with one line I can accomplish something that would probably at least take 2 lines. So in this case, it's much shorter. I'm using jQuery. I'm looking for the user ID. I'm going to search for the ID attribute. I'm going to concatenate that with this string, and I'm going to concatenate that with the user ID's value. Let's see if it works. If I come back to the page, make sure you save your code, refresh the page, click on the button, you'll see this right here, $ is not defined. We learned this in the previous video. What's that mean? Well, that means that we forgot to import our jQuery. So I'll come up here to the top. Remember, you got to import jQuery before you can start using it. I'm going to import it with just an external JavaScript link to my jQuery that's in the directory. So I'm using a local link on this one. I could also use the CDN. Save the code, refresh the page, click on the button, and now you'll see this right here. Now, user didn't have a value because I didn't type anything. So if I type something, let's say Nick, then click on get user, you'll actually see that take effect here. So with 2 lines of code, I've shortened it to 1 line of code, and you'll see the syntax is just a little bit different. I'm still using .value, but I have a function to get the value. I'm still using the ID attribute, but I have a function that I call to get the attribute. So a lot of times in jQuery, you access the jQuery library, you do your selector, and then you're going to call a function. Whereas JavaScript, I can just use the dot notation and access that object directly. But with jQuery, I'm going to be calling functions for everything. Now let's take a look at set username. I'm going to comment this line of code out. You'll see I had to call document.getElement by ID. With jQuery, after I have it loaded, I just put the user ID and then call the value function. Here, I didn't have a parameter, so it's going to get the value. If I specify a parameter, let's say Sally, which is what we had before, it's going to set the value. So no parameter gets the value. Specifying a parameter sets the value. Same with the .value in JavaScript. If I just do .value, it's going to get the value. If I do .value equals something, it's going to set the value. So I wrote this code. I'm going to move the window here, save it, refresh, do a get, do a set, and you'll see Sally has been set for the value by just writing this 1 line of code. And you'll see it's much shorter. I don't have to call it document.getElement by ID. It's essentially this second half here. I call the user ID, I call the value function, and I set it to Sally. Here's the jQuery function call. I specify a parameter in the function call, which is going to be the user ID. Then I call the jQuery.value function to set the value to Sally. What about checking the password? Here we had to at least write 3 lines of code. Let's comment this out. Let's see how we can do this using jQuery. So here I'm not going to store it to a variable. Now you can, if the password's consistently changing, it may be better to store it to a variable. But here I'm just calling it once. I can say if the password ID, so I'm selecting it, and I need to grab the value because that's what we did before. So to grab the value, I just call the value function with no parameter. Then we need to check the length. So once this jQuery statement runs, it's going to return a string. So I can actually call the length attribute or property on this string. I can do the same, less than equal to 8 as the code up above. And then I can do, let's say, an alert. Password is too short, which is what we had before. So now I don't have to store it to a variable. I just access it directly. I could access it directly here, but it's going to be very long. It's going to say document.getElementById with password as a parameter, .value, .length, or I just use jQuery, grab the password, grab the value, check the link, and display the alert. Let's see if this works. Refresh, do a check. You'll see password is too short. How do I know the jQuery is running? Here I'll add an extra exclamation mark. This one has 1, this one has 3. Save it, refresh, do a check. You'll see I have 3 explanations there. So this is the equivalent in jQuery as the previous code. At first, let's try this on your own. Take what we have here, implement the jQuery ready function, implement the jQuery click functions on all the buttons, and then execute the corresponding code. Try this on your own, see if you can get it to work. Take some time to do this so you can learn as we're going along, and then continue to the next video.